in the territory of the Stalo peoples, where there are 24 nations. I work in Abbotsford, and that is the traditional territory of the Lakamo, Mathakwe, and the Samath First Nations. But we are here this morning and privileged to gather on land known as Jojage. This is the land as acknowledged, or the language of the Gahanyak Gehaga people, which means people of the flint. This is their traditional and unceded territory, which is now known as Montreal. And this has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst many First Nations, including the Ganyak Gehaga of the Haudenosaunee people, or Confederacy, as well as the Huron, Wendat, Abenaki, and the Anishinaabe people. And so it's a great privilege to be able to be here and to welcome these folks. Adam is going to present first, followed by Anna and Mitch. And they'll each have about 30 minutes to present, and then we'll have 30 minutes at the end for questions. And without any further ado,
all right,
Adam.
Thank you. Hey everybody. The post-lunch presentation, I'll try to make this as interesting and enjoyable as possible, but no guarantees. My name is Adam Riggi. I'm Director of Strategy and Evaluation for Community Solutions. Community Solutions runs the Built for Zero program within the United States. Based in the U.S., we are an organization that works with multiple communities, which I'll get into, and multiple countries implementing what we call the Built for Zero model, which is really what I'm going to dig into during this presentation today. So I want to thank you for your curiosity in joining us today, and I look forward to hearing your questions at the end and your insights, but also very excited to hear from our colleagues at Canadian Alliance around the work that they're doing as well. You know, we are strong partners with the Canadian Alliance, and I think our roots go way back, many, many years. And I have to say, from a personal standpoint, this is my second year coming to this conference, and there's so much energy, so much hope in the room. It's really incredible. Hope in a time, at least in the United States, where that is starting to diminish. As I describe this kind of our model and the things we've learned, it's all in the face of what is fundamentally becoming the dismantling of our systems in the U.S. And we believe that truth will still be there when these are dismantled. We actually believe that we can hope for something better and more, but it is not a pleasant process as we go through it. So what I want to do is just give an overview of what, kind of what we do in Built for Zero, what we've learned, and showcase what we've learned, and then also do a little bit more deeper dive of the components of the Built for Zero model. This is actually something that is we haven't released broadly. I wanted to use this as an opportunity to share as this group, but what you're going to see is the culmination of about 10 or 15 years of experience in our organization, experience with communities, as well as third-party evaluation and research that really speaks to what the core components that need to be happening in communities to reduce homelessness, as well as the factors that prevent or enable it. So again, we are a nationwide, international organization. We support over 160 communities in the United States, from deep South rural conservative communities to progressive communities in the Pacific Northwest and the West Coast. We are a nonpartisan organization, and we have found that the work that we do in the model that we support communities to utilize is it goes beyond kind of political partisanship and political rhetoric. It is something that we've seen adopted across the nation. We also work with five different countries, including Canada, Australia, Denmark, Great Britain, UK, and France. And it's always amazing to me to see, and as I'm an evaluation specialist by my kind of training, that goes back, and it's always amazing for me to see how quickly international communities pick up the model as opposed to the United States. Some of the core components of the model actually come natural, it seems, for our international partners. It comes along it's taken a long time for the U.S. to adopt many elements of it. So I just want to give just a little bit of a history of kind of where we as an organization have been. Community Solutions has been around for some time, actually goes back about 15 or 20 years. And there was an initiative that was started, I think, back in 2013 called 100,000 Homes. I believe Canada had an equivalent 20,000 homes around the same time. It was this idea that if communities across the nation could work on making housing the priority and making housing processes more efficient, homelessness would be reduced. And you know what? We did. We saw over 100,000 chronically homeless individuals that were housed through a 3-year period. But the reality of it was that the homelessness did not actually decrease. Now, sure, some of the most vulnerable people came off the street into permanent housing, but the homelessness in itself did not actually decrease. So back in 2015, the organization decided to count down. So it's a very, very different approach, a much more complicated approach, right? It's easy to look at one measure to aim towards counting up how many housing placements there have been, which is actually something we still count. We still track that. But that being the sole metric, we achieved the goal but didn't actually fundamentally change the system. So we decided to take a very different approach and count down. Now, counting down requires a much more complex and sophisticated approach, right? One that and we use a number of different data points, a number of different measures to really understand if systems are changing. So that's where the Built for Zero work really started back in 2015, 2016, somewhere around there. And in this moment, I think we're at another kind of a point of inflection, right? To really understand what the next strategy will be. Where are we going to next? And we've had, over the last 5 years, so 5 years ago, Community Solutions was awarded the MacArthur Foundation 100 and Change Award. We were so graciously and thankfully awarded over $100 million to implement the Built for Zero model in the United States. And we're at the 5-year mark now. We're almost at the end of this journey. And through that journey, we've had the luxury of having a third-party evaluator, ORS Impact, actually follow us. They've been very closely working with us, looking at the work that we do in the field, looking at the work that we do with other communities, and documenting and identifying our theory of change. Understanding, is the theory of change actually impacting communities in a positive way? What are those other enabling conditions, those other factors that are affecting a community's ability to see reductions in homelessness? And so right now, they're in the latest focus, and they're actually doing some work with us to truly evaluate, to attribute or see where there's contribution versus attribution of the model in communities. And what we're seeing is that there are some very positive attributions that are happening, in that communities that adopt core components of the Built for Zero model are actually seeing reductions in homelessness as compared to those that don't. So that's just a little bit of background. All this content is all in the slide deck, so you can download it. We have a ton of resources on the Community Solutions website as well, if you want to take a look and do a deeper dive into it. But the thing I want to share, and this is, this is something, again, that has been tested through years and years of experience of third-party evaluation, research, and our own kind of experience doing this work, is that communities, there's a pattern that we see, and I would love to hear from our colleagues in Canada to see if they see the same things, that there's two kind of core elements that contribute to success in seeing reductions in homelessness. One, communities that have achieved that sustainable population level reduction, right? So seeing actual homelessness go down, not just moved or thrown to the shadows, but actually seeing reductions, There's 4 foundational capabilities that system has. And we are somewhat vague in saying what that system is because it's so locally based, right? And I'll get into that in a moment. It could be your governmental system. It could be a local NGO. It could be a healthcare system. But really four key components are in place. 4 foundational components are in place at a local level. And that the second piece is that progress is actually enabled or prohibited by 5 enabling conditions, okay? So I want to just share what those 4 foundational capabilities are, right? And I'm going to go into detail into each of them. We do have a blog post that we wrote up on this with a lot more detail. QR code there, or you can also access it on our site if you want to get more detail into this model or in this framework. But want to just share that that's available. The 4 kind of and this is at a local community level, right? And community can be defined, and I know Canada, it's a little bit different. In the United States, we look at continuums of care. Sometimes we look at municipalities. It's really dependent on kind of how the boundaries are controlled, how the funding flows, and all of that. So for this purpose, we're going to say communities. That there's a backbone organization, number one, that there's an organization or an entity that is actually accountable to seeing reductions in homelessness, right? The one thing we know in the United States is that nobody actually owns the issue at a local level. We know mayors of cities get blamed for it, but they actually don't own the issue, right? They don't have authority over it. So what we do is we've learned that when communities can actually develop a backbone organization or an entity like maybe city government or a nonprofit organization that is ultimately accountable to reducing and ending homelessness, that's a key component of the model. That needs to be in place for communities to see reductions. Second, and this may, for those of you that are not working in the homeless system, this may seem a little weird. I always say this because it always seems like this is common sense. But the second one is there is a shared goal, right? That there's a shared, consistent goal in across the organization in reducing homelessness. Getting alignment among all the providers within a city or decision makers in a city around reducing, maybe it's reducing a rough sleeping, or maybe it's reducing family homelessness, whatever that may be. The shared goal is a key component of the model. This goes back into collective impact research that goes back years in different sectors. We know that having that goal is absolutely essential. Third is strategic partnerships. And this is something in the United States we've really struggled with over the last few years, just to be frank, in that the response system has been somewhat insular, right? Providers that do the work, that we have continuums of care that lead the work, that haven't really been open to hearing from other sectors, right? Maybe it's the for-profit industry, maybe it's the local police or EMS or emergency management services, right? So what we've seen consistently, though, is that when communities are doing work to improve strategic partnerships across the board, whether it be nonprofit, for-profit, aligned around this shared goal, do we see positive outcomes? And then fourth, comprehensive data, which is kind of my area of expertise. We do a lot of work, and I know we work a lot with Canadian Alliance to develop the capacity at the local level to know and understand at any given point how many people are experiencing homelessness, the reasons why they're coming into homelessness, and the reason that they're leaving homelessness, right? And this is a core foundational element that is required for communities to make progress. So again, and there's actually another session on backbone organizations that's being led by my colleague Ian Fletcher. If you want to learn more about this and what our organization has done about backbone specifically, I encourage you to sign up for that session. They do a tremendous amount of work, not just in the United States, but internationally around backbone organizations. And it's a very, very complex, and I'm not going to do it justice during this call. But again, backbone organizations, they provide that coordination structure and that accountability to see reductions in homelessness, right? Aligning partners around shared goals, holding responsible, holding teams and organizations responsible for that. And then really just ensuring sustained focus on reductions, right, in their goals. Second one is that shared goal. I not going to go into too much more detail because I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but this idea that across the system, however that system might look in your local community, that there's clear, measurable, and time-bound goal that unites stakeholders around that goal, right? That's where we see, I'll give you an example, in Denver, Colorado. If you're not familiar with the work that's been done in Denver, they have a backbone organization out of the mayor's office, right? And the new mayor in 2023 had made it his goal to see a reduction in unsheltered homelessness in Denver, right? A really risky political statement to make for somebody who traditionally didn't have much influence over homelessness, but he did that, established a backbone organization, set a shared goal, had data, and they've actually seen homelessness reduce in Denver by almost 50%, unsheltered homelessness reduced by almost 50% in the last 2 years. Unprecedented national, in the United States. But it all started with this goal that he had said he wanted to see 1,000 people off the streets of Denver. Not all of them could go to permanent housing because the reality of the housing system, a housing market in Denver is impossible, right? It's so expensive in Denver. So they built up capacity for interim housing, right? Which I'll get into when I talk about housing supply as an enabling condition. But we're actually seeing how a shared goal, rallying around that shared goal will support, achieving reductions. The strategic partnerships, which I expanded on, or I shared a little bit earlier, but again, thinking outside the box, so to speak, right? Thinking about including those other partners that maybe traditionally are not part of the homeless response system that may interact with individuals experiencing homelessness, right? There's an amazing story that I think a lot about when I think about the innovation that's happening around strategic partnerships. During COVID, we had a community in Deep South. I mean, I'm talking like Deep South, Bible Belt, Deep South America, right, in the United States, where no service providers were able to actually go and inspect housing units, right? There's a requirement for individuals that have Section 8 or housing choice vouchers or subsidized housing vouchers to have their units inspected by the local provider. But those local providers were not allowed to be outside because of COVID restrictions. The local backbone organization actually worked with the police department to do the inspections for them, right? This is an example, I think, of innovation that's happening in really those actors, those like unlikely partners, unlikely actors, and we see time and time again when communities are opening their doors to other actors, more progress is made. They may not agree 100% with folks. That's okay. If there's 80% agreement, the reality is that we also see that, people want to actually see, they don't want to see people suffering. They don't want to see people on the street. And so when you can find that alignment with even partners that you wouldn't expect, you see those kinds of outcomes. And then fourth is this comprehensive data, which we have, out of all of these, we actually have the most written up about. We actually, in the U.S., we have right now over 100 communities that actually have real-time data, right? Which means that they can actually identify how many people are experiencing homelessness at any given time. Sometimes it's for a population, like a veterans. Other times, like in Charlotte, North Carolina, they know at any given time how many people are experiencing homelessness, how many people are leaving homelessness, demographic information, for the whole system, right? And we're seeing this uptake. We're seeing more and more communities do this because the reality is the data, as I was speaking to a gentleman from earlier, the expectation more and more is becoming in government or philanthropy or nonprofit organizations to see outcomes, right? And what we believe is that this data, having real-time data, will not only support those who are experiencing homelessness. We've actually seen homelessness be reduced quicker, people moving through the system quicker, but it'll actually give confidence for local government that these are services or these are things that need to be funded, continue to be funded. So comprehensive data is a core kind of cornerstone of the foundational model, the Built for Zero model. So with those are tough enough, and I think this just speaks to the complexity of the systems we work in, right? These are human systems, and they're complex, and they're very fragile at times, and I don't want to discount that at all, because the reality is you can have all four of those things, but if these five things are not in place, it's going to get kind of hard, right? And more now, as I assume is in Canada and the United States, the housing affordability crisis is becoming so great that it doesn't matter how good your system is. Study after study, data, research after research has said that communities that don't have the housing stock and housing affordability, right, even for general population, see increases in homelessness. It's not drugs. I mean, these things contribute, drugs, alcohol, whatever, those can be contributors, but the bottom line is the housing affordability. And so, I'll talk about this, but the housing supply is the number one factor in communities, by far. But these five enabling conditions are things that continue to monitor, continue to kind of understand, right? Because I think when you have a good understanding of where kind of you are as a community in these areas, you have a better understanding of what the strategy should be, okay? Not every community has a housing crisis, right? In the United States, that's true in the United States. Houston, Texas has always stood up as a city that doesn't have that much of a housing affordability crisis as, let's say, Seattle, Washington, or Los Angeles, right? So there may be other factors that need to be worked on. But we know that these five conditions are what accelerate or prevent progress. So policy, and this is at every level, right? And maybe it's a local municipal level or at this provincial or state level and then federal level, really policies that really do enable things like collaboration, that enable testing and innovation and data sharing, right? And housing access. What we've seen in the US at least is that oftentimes very rigid rules policies are being implemented at the federal level that don't allow for innovation at the local level. We know homelessness is a local issue fundamentally, right? The factors in local communities contribute to homelessness, right? So that has prevented many communities from doing some innovation, right? But we know that when state governments actually allow for innovation or local governments do, we actually see better results. The policy that also, encourages that alignment across systems to sustain progress is key, and then policies that are not overly criminalize homelessness. We know that in the United States we had a big ruling from the Supreme Court last year. It was a grants pass ruling that basically said that communities are no longer communities have the authority, local municipalities have, I'm paraphrasing here, local municipalities have the authority to arrest people who are sleeping out in the street, right? Previously it was that they did not have the authority if there were shelter beds available. Supreme Court made that change. What we're seeing is that there are some cities that are actually arresting people and they're incarcerating people. And you might have seen some of the news about the National Guard getting involved in Washington, D.C. and other cities across the U.S. where people were actually being, arrested. What we're seeing more of, though, is communities and municipalities are enacting policies that are more person-centered. They're actually not arresting people. They're building interim housing. They're building shelters. They're building interim shelters, or they're moving people straight to housing, right? So even though the grants pass ruling allowed for municipalities to arrest people, that's not been the case for most, because there's this realization that just creates an endless cycle, right? The jail and street cycle, right? I don't know what you call it in Canada, but that's how we refer it in the United States. Cities do not have the budget to continuously house people in their jails, right? So having supportive policies is absolutely key, and that's one of them, not criminalizing people experiencing homelessness. Shared public narrative, which I will argue is probably the one thing we know the least about. We're doing some really interesting work that we want to make sure we share with our partners here in Canada around public narrative. We have a number of polls and focus groups around around this issue. And just the bottom line that we've learned, one of the things that we've learned is that the old narratives don't work any longer, right? At least not in the United States. And that we need to refresh those narratives. We need to come up with new ways of talking about homelessness in a way that isn't going to, that will lead to, what do I want to say? It will lead to more kind of like a public understanding that this is a problem that can be managed and solved, right? So some communities in the U.S. have done okay at this, but I think what we need to do is a fundamental shift in how we are talking about this and how we're bringing people along. So anyway, this is the one area that we know probably the least about, I would argue. Funding and resources, of course, you can't operate these programs without the right funding and resources. One thing that we know is that unrestricted funding can actually have some of the best outcomes. Flexible funding sources, those sorts of things are things that communities really need because, again, going back to the comment I made earlier, homelessness is local, right? It's in local municipalities, local communities need to have some flexibility in being able to use the funding that they have to be able to solve the problem. So having, and then the other point I'd like to make too is that funding that's associated with outcomes, right? That there should be a higher expectation for funding that will actually lead to people leaving the streets, right, or getting into services that they need. So more outcome-based funding that's more flexible and adaptable to local community needs. And then, the housing supply. Time and time again, and this is so true now more than ever, that it doesn't matter if all of these things are in place. It doesn't matter how much funding that the government can give for your response system, your homeless response system. If you don't have the housing supply to actually house people, it's not going to matter, right? And in the U.S., the problem is just gotten so much worse over the last few years that even in cities like Nashville, Tennessee, where it traditionally had been affordable cities, becoming somewhat unaffordable for people, right? So housing supply is the one thing that we as an organization are really trying to understand more about, right? And this is kind of what we see as our next kind of foray. What is the housing supply? How is the housing supply actually reducing, impacting the homelessness challenge in communities, right? So housing supply is the biggest enabling condition in communities by far. And then finally, that political will. I give you an example of Denver, right? Denver's mayor, who actually had the shared goal, developed the backbone organization, developed the political will to see reductions in, to drive reductions in homelessness. And that works, right? None of this can be possible, really, unless there's political will, unless there's a desire locally to actually address and solve the problem. It is striking to me that, that when I go to Denver, I use Denver a lot because I think it's like an example of the model playing out in real time. I was on the 16th Street Mall a few years ago. 16th Street Mall is a pedestrian walkway area with a bunch of shops and restaurants and so forth in downtown Denver. And it had a ton of encampments, had a ton of people that were sleeping out in the street. You go towards the State House, the Colorado State House, you would see encampments on the State House lawn. 2 years ago, that was all gone. And so were most of the encampments throughout the city. Now, the thing that Denver did, which was just absolutely incredible, was that they not only they made this concerted effort to reduce the encampments, but actually shared with the public where people were, not at the individual level, but at aggregate level, to say this is the throughput, right? We moved this many people in the interim shelter, and this many more people are moving into permanent housing. They were transparent throughout the whole process. That required that political will, right? Not just with the mayor's office, but also with the local service providers and others. And, that has been sustained. So again, I just want to kind of just share how strong, those 5 conditions, complex, right? But those interplay of those 5 enabling conditions are essential to see reductions. We have more information about our theory of change, we have a blog post written up. Feel free to access that. We have a ton of information about our data infrastructure and our data work. We really want to make our content open source and available across any community, whether it be in the United States, Canada, wherever. So please encourage you to take a look at our website, read about the theory of change. There's my email if you have more questions to follow up on. And thank you. How am I doing on time? Okay? Okay, all right, all right.
All right. Okay, good.
Good afternoon, everybody. There are some other seats here for the folks that are standing at the back. If you don't want to keep standing, there are some other seats. I hate the idea of you standing and then having to do the shuffle, or then have to just sit on the floor. So there are seats if you would like them, folks. I have promised, and for anybody that knows me, I have promised to try to speak slowly and articulate clearly, because there are lovely people trying to translate words, and my words sometimes are a little bit different. Hi, my name's Anna. I work at the Canadian Alliance with Mitch, and I'm going to do a little bit of a background about where the Canadian Alliance is that very much aligns with a lot of the stuff that you actually heard Adam talking about. So, who are the Canadian Alliance for anyone who doesn't know? We're a national movement, mobilising communities, working with you in community on ending homelessness in Canada. We do it through data, we do it through coaching, we do it through training, we do it by walking with you and changing the systems, because we know the systems are broken. That's what we do with you. A little bit of history. Back in 2012, CAA started, and there was literally only two people. There was our president, Tim, and Trish, who is our go-to for everything. And it started in Tim's basement, believe it or not. Now, they weren't in the basement together. I am not starting a rumour, but he did start the organisation in his basement. That's where Tim had the idea that we weren't looking at just counting people in shelter beds. We were actually trying to look at creating system change. So, fast forward a year, and it's 2013. Oops, sorry, it's my fingers. And we held our first national conference. It was small. Everybody gathered in one room at the Delta Hotel, apparently. And that was the start of what you see today. There's over 2,300 people here today. Sorry, the translation, I'm slipping. I'm going to try. Oh, dear. So we held our first national conference back in 2013. Oops, I am using someone else's machine. And since then, as you know, and you can see today, we are the biggest national conference for homelessness. Adam was talking about 100,000 homes back in the States. In Canada, back in 2015, we launched the 20,000 homes campaign. Is there anybody here that remembers that? There's some of you here. Yes, and we completely blew that out of the water. We well and truly blew that out of the water. We hit that goal 2 years early. Oh, am I a wee bit loud? Now, that campaign focused on us working on by name lists, coordinated access, and point-in-time counts. Again, that's talking about gathering data because we need information. By 2017, we were helping shape Canada's national housing strategy, which led to a $13.2 billion investment. Sorry. Oops, I did it again. Oops.
All right, Anna.
There you go. Can you tell I'm not using my own laptop today? Try to go into that bit there.
No problem. Just go like this.
Yeah, where is it? Oh, you can't find it either? Oh,
Yeah. Apologies.
I think the mouse pad just died. Sorry. Going to go into here.
Let's go. Yeah, computer's not responsive.
I have a plan.
Okay, we've clicked in and we're good now. Okay. But we're not able to actually scroll down on this side
That
for,
was, it
for
this
notes.
froze. It's okay.
There you go. Okay.
Oh,
Great.
okay.
Thank you very much.
Scroll down.
Okay. I'll only touch that. Okay, okay. There you go. Oops. You know what? So in 2013, we held our first national conference, as I told you, back in the Delta Hotel. We have grown into one of the biggest conferences in the country. 2015, we did launch the 20,000 Homes campaign, and we did think that would be really ambitious, and we blew that target out of the water 2 years early. That did introduce our by name lists, coordinated access, point-in-time counts. That is where we gather data. You need data. Data is power and information. In 2017, we were helping shaping Canada's national housing strategy, and that led to a $13.2 billion investment. A year later, in 2018, we launched Built for Zero Canada. Now, that is where we were looking towards getting measurable reductions to functional zero. That led CAH being invited to advise and consult with the Prime Minister's office on redesigning federal funding. So that's back in 2018. For anyone who's been doing this for a few years, you'll remember we used to have something called HPS, Homeless Partnering Strategy, and that is now reaching home. Part of that is because of the work that the Canadian Alliance did. In 2019, we helped enshrine the right to housing in Canadian law. There is a national housing advocate. We do have housing recognised as a human right. We need to get better at actually doing it. In 2020, that Reaching Home investment was $2.2 billion. Now, the Reaching Home goal is ending or to cut chronic homelessness in half. Now, 2020 and 2021, there was a little thing called a pandemic. Despite that, we still saw communities ending homelessness. Medicine Hat became the first community to get functional zero for chronic homelessness. That is massive in any time, but to do it in a pandemic is phenomenal. London, Ontario was the first community to declare functional zero for veteran homelessness. And so far, we have around about 17 communities who have actually declared functional zero on one of those categories. Now, for 2023 to today, we've continued the push for more support to increase housing availability and affordability. We've seen more progress in federal budgets, including the Housing Accelerator Fund, but where now? So, if we know CH is a national catalyst for change, if we know we're about driving continuous improvement and collecting data to continually make it better, and we use the data to advocate for more funding and changing to policies, what else? Well, there might be a little announcement later on in the conference. There might be, there might be something, just saying, there might be a wee thing. Minister Robertson might be coming to make an announcement about money, just saying. That'll be Thursday. So overall, what does that mean for us and what we do? We're talking about community solutions in the States, and we're talking about the Canadian Alliance here. We are not levels of government. We work at the ground level. We work with all of you. Change comes from the ground up. Non-profits, charities, those other NGO organisations, they make change happen. They're the drivers for change. And you could argue that provincial, territorial and federal governments follow them because that's where the innovation lies. I'm going to pass you on over to Mitch, who's going to give you some more of the technical stuff on the data. I haven't touched this in case it breaks.
All right. Thanks so much, Anna. I've always wanted a Scottish hype person, so. Okay. I'm going to try to master the scrolling here. We'll see if I can actually do it. Okay, I've got notes. We're good to go. Why are we investing in homelessness if there continue to be increases here? Where do these people come from? Surely not from our small city. It's about drugs, isn't it? they're all on drugs and don't want housing. Why can't we just incarcerate these people and clean up our streets? They come in the summer and they'll be gone by the winter. Don't worry about extreme weather planning. These are all things that I've heard in my career, on the airplane here actually, and I'm sure that you've heard them as well. You can be outraged, and I know the vast majority of people at this conference are, but moral arguments alone aren't enough to make those policies, non-housing first policies, criminalization, become a reality. I know there's a lot of data people here in the room, and honestly, it's up to us, with our colleagues, of course. We need to tell a clear story. We need to own the numbers. We need to visualize the data, and we need to get in front of as many influential people as possible and show them the facts. Not sharing data, hiding data, does a disservice to the mission. I want to tell you a quick story. Before I worked with the Alliance, I worked at the community level. I'm currently the data lead at CAH. But I was working at the community level, and I just had finished my master's program in data science. I was very excited to enter the sector. My cousin had experienced homelessness, and unfortunately, he's since passed away while experiencing homelessness. So I was keen to make a difference. And I did a custom analysis in my community. We didn't have the same data systems that Adam was speaking about, or that we have with the 62 communities we work with across Canada. So that custom data analysis was what was necessary to provide some facts. My analysis showed that the city had done a fantastic job supporting, building supportive housing over several years, but they had no plan to build any further supportive housing. And so the growth rate in homelessness was being offset by those builds. And the growth rate was very consistent, 100% year over year, 3 years in a row. So we would expect that to continue. So I shared my findings with as many people as I possibly could. And one of the reactions was, I wouldn't share that. That's not part of our plan. We can't tell them we're not on track. And I just want to say, I'm sure that some of you have experienced that as well. It's difficult, but I told everyone I possibly could with the authority of my supervisor and in a strategic way. But we shared that information far and wide. And so what I'm saying is, as a data analyst or as somebody who's looking at numbers, don't hide numbers. Don't cherry pick them. It's actually transparency with the data, even if it's not going in our favor. That's what makes this movement effective. We need to be able to see that if the numbers are going to grow, why is that? What can we do different now? And I'm not angry at that person for what they said. I think that they had good intentions, and they were probably just shocked at the number, that they weren't on track. They didn't expect that to happen. But again, making the point, had we had these kind of data systems, which I'm going to share with you here, they wouldn't have been shocked. They would have seen every step of the way, every month when communities submit data to us, and they would have been less afraid to tell the story, because it's not just a story of an increase, like a pit count. It's actually a story of a system with inflow, active, and outflow. So you're able to speak to the wins. And up next, I'm going to tell you about one big win, which I'm very excited about. $100,020 moves to housing as of Friday, October 24th, 2025. That's how many times a person experiencing homelessness has moved into housing, and our partners have shared that information with us since the movement began. Now, we know this is an undercount. Communities join the movement at different times, and they don't reach quality data right away. And we still don't work with all communities across Canada. But as I mentioned, we work with 62 of you, and we're incredibly grateful. Think for a second. Can you imagine what Canada would look like now if the support sector and the system didn't exist? It would be very tragic. How many lives would be lost? How much bigger would the encampments be? How many more encampments would there be? So while I appreciate that we need to count down, we also need in this environment to speak to the successes that we're all having. And yes, we need to make every dollar go further, but we can still celebrate this accomplishment. I want to introduce you to our incredible team that made that analysis and many other analysis possible. I'm going to make you guys stand up and wave. So over the past year, we've managed to have a transformational change in our data infrastructure. We've moved from an Excel-based sheet, which was quite frankly a bit of a nightmare and a legacy piece, with 1,000-ish columns, towards an Azure SQL database. It's freed up our capacity to work with communities, to be innovative, and to do less administrative work. By the end of the year, we'll be adding another data advisor to the team, and we're investing in data. Data is essential to who we are as an organization, and as I've explained to you earlier, data is essential to the movement to end homelessness. 34 communities have already signed our data sharing agreement. Now this agreement formalizes a historical arrangement that we've had, an informal one, where communities share data with us monthly. And this is going to be critical for the next phase of our work, where we're really going to be leveling things up. I'm going to be sharing that with you later on in the presentation. But for the 34 communities, I just want to say thank you so much for your commitment to transparency and for being part of a national movement and the voice. Okay, geeking out now, kind of. So essentially what we operate at CAH is a hub and spoke model, where communities submit data to us, currently through a digital job form, but could always change in the future. It's currently aggregate or de-identified data. We will never be receiving identifiable data. It'll always not be able to be traced back to the individual. Then that goes into our Azure SQL database, and behind the scenes, we create dashboards. So right now, if a community was able to submit inflow, active, and outflow data to us, I asked Ara this earlier at lunch, how many minutes would it take for them to have a dashboard? 5 to 10 minutes, you'll have a dashboard. So the idea is really, our team is your team. We could have worked independently with 62 communities across Canada and built 62 different dashboards, but we chose not to do that. Maybe that would be a lucrative thing to do, but it's not the right thing to do, and it's not the right thing for ending homelessness. What we chose to do is build once for everyone, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the advantages of that. We're really powering a national data system that serves all communities in the movement simultaneously. Communities don't just receive dashboards, they help shape them. So we had a big feedback session in the spring. At any given time, you can email any of us. You might see your feedback implemented within a week. This isn't a long process. It's iterative development, fast, agile improvement. Every new insight, fix, or feature benefits all partners. And with each iteration, the system is more responsive to local needs. We get feedback, we develop, we deploy, and we benefit everyone across the country who wants to participate. Now, really quickly, before I get into our own dashboard, I just want to acknowledge that, again, I did work at the community level, and I know that there are brilliant people at the community level. Our goal is in no way to replace what's being done at the community level. There'll be different responses from different communities, but you'll see there's a benefit for all of you in participating in this. It doesn't mean your dashboard, your local dashboard that you have, has to go away at all. But we would like you to participate in what we're doing. And again, I'll explain the benefits of that as we go along. But for some of the smaller communities, some of the newer communities, again, you can have a dashboard right off the bat, and you can focus on impactful research or driving change in your community because we're able to do this for you. So this is our page. Hopefully it's big enough up there. This is our landing page. We have 13 pages on our dashboard. You're able to select a population, a subpopulation. Populations are chronic or non-chronic, essentially, which we call all homelessness, veteran. And you could pick a subpopulation like Indigenous, youth, single adults, seniors. You can see your inflow, active, and outflow data, and you can basically look from month to month. You can select an individual month, and you can see the data points populate when you hover over them. So on the inflow side, we have return from housing, return from inactive, newly identified, and if we're looking at the chronic population, we have aged in. On the outflow side, we have moved to housing and moved to inactive, and we're working with our federal partners to build out those data points and include some incarceration data, which is very exciting moving forward. Okay. Anna spoke a little bit about HRIF. I'm not the big announcement person, but I'm excited to tell you a lot more about HRIF and a little bit about eligibility, but also more about the data infrastructure we've built to support these projects, which is very innovative and exciting in my opinion. So HRIF is ultimately about shared learning, building capacity, and homelessness reductions. Communities must be willing to share monthly aggregate quality by name data with us, monthly at a minimum, and funded projects commit to sharing their learning outcomes and project data with us. We will then share learning and success from funded projects and other communities, with other communities across the country. So let's talk about how that actually happens right now. So we've equipped HRIF projects with tools that support real-time project tracking, real-time scalability, and real-time insights, and real-time adjustments. First, the project tracking. So communities that we work with already submit that monthly data to us, the 62 communities. Project-specific trends are visualized on a dashboard in real time. This is one of those pages there. So yes, it's complicated. Yes, it can be learned. It's not rocket science. I could speak to it. Okay, so this individual project at the top is a housing initiative project. So it's fictitious. This is Mapleville, Ontario. You could click the scroll down and select any number of improvement projects. So communities can have more than one. This could be infinite. You could have every project you've ever done in your community logged in here because we intend to expand this infrastructure to include non-HRIF projects eventually. Now, it's a housing initiative project, so the data point that you're focusing on is move-ins. So we've filtered the data for you so you can see basically whether your project is on track or not and how you're performing each month just from a data perspective. We understand there's other qualitative considerations that we need to bake into these projects as well. So for this particular project, we were able to set a baseline of 80, meaning that the community, looking back 12 months, had an average of 80 move-ins into housing a month. So you would say, to improve that metric, you want more than 80. We can't go backwards. We have to move more people into housing faster. So the community would agree through a contract to pursue a monthly aim of 85, so an improvement of 5 move-ins a month. So over a 12-month project, we'd expect to see an increase of 60 move-ins. As communities submit data, they automatically get the number that they actually are at every month. So this community is at 87.8. Down below, we have active homelessness information as well, because it's not enough just to improve a data point. That's a good starting goal, but you actually want to reduce homelessness for the specific population. So you're able to track that. So one thing that really bothered me historically when I was at the community level is that things were talked about as, did active homelessness go down or up when you were measuring impacts? But we know, again, it's not that simple. You need to look at year-over-year growth. What is the trajectory of the system? For example, an extreme example, let's say homelessness was increasing by 1,000 people every year, and you introduce an improvement project, and you got that number down to 500. Yes, homelessness still went up, but you're, hate to use the phrase, bending the curve. Forgive me. But really, I mean, these are the kind of things that we have to consider when we're communicating the value of our projects, because we all know it's a tough housing environment, and if homelessness does go up, you need to be able to explain that what you did have value, did have an impact. So that's why we've gone to this level of sophistication, not just because we like data. Projects are built with real-time insights. By having access to data in real time, communities can see what's going on, making it easier to determine issues, causes, pardon me, wrong way, and ultimately solutions. This way they can pivot and apply their learnings quickly. So here's an example I'll just be really quick about, but you can see a lot of red on there, indicating that the project was ultimately not very successful. What we don't want is a scenario like I talked about at the beginning of the presentation, where people realize that they didn't achieve their goals right at the very end of the project. We want them to know right away that they're actually not on track. And that's okay. You can work with your coach. We have coaches, improvement advisors that work with the communities, and you can find a better way. Again, we're all learning, adapting in real time to data. This is the way. Real-time scalability. So this is the part that I think has the infinite potential that I'm particularly excited about for us. The project dashboards that we've created also include pages to browse other communities' projects. So this is in Power BI right now, but at some point we want to include this kind of analysis, but also some significant qualitative information about the projects on our website. So on the y-axis, you can see % change from baseline. You're able to filter by a data point. In this case, to keep it simple, let's look at move-ins. More move-ins is good, so you want to be north of 0. Each dot on this visualization is another improvement project across Canada. And one day, I believe we'll see thousands of dots. You can hover over the dots right now and you can learn more about the improvement projects. And then, if you see a successful project you're interested in, you can click into it and see all the data. No, it's just information, it's just data. But what's really exciting is when we build out the qualitative component, you'll be able to see how to launch that project in your community. You'll get a project template so you can do it quickly. You'll be able to speak to precedents. The project was already successful in another community that's just like ours. We've got a coach that can customize it to our context. This is powerful, changing stuff, I think. What we're really talking about is scaling what works. A catalog of improvement projects leads to community adoption. We then measure when those projects are relaunched in other communities, why not? Which then leads to outcomes. And those go back to shared learning automatically. It's already built. And it goes to the catalog of improvement projects. Now, it's not perfect. We're just starting. It works, but it's going to get better. It's going to get a lot better. And that's pretty exciting. Now, quick time check, Graham. How am I doing? 3 minutes left? All right. That's good. So, I want to speak about Homeless Management Information System KPIs, or Key Performance Indicators. And I'm talking about data that we want to move towards collecting in the future. Let's say diversion success rate, you've got that. Diversion attempted rate, case management ratio, and client interaction frequency. Just a few of the metrics that you might already be pulling and querying your database to get. Now, let's look at Mapleville, a hypothetical community. Let's say the diversion success rate is 30%. The diversion attempted rate, 60%. There's 30 clients per case manager and 1.4 interactions per client per month. Is that good? Is it? It's kind of hard to tell. You know that you want to have a better diversion success rate, and you can kind of study how diversion success rate impacts your outcomes, your inflow. But at the end of the day, it's kind of limited if you can't look at what other people are doing. So the same principle applies. We'd like to move towards a future where we have these shared metrics together defined in a very easy way for you to share the data with us. There are large data dumps, and there's things that you can let us do the heavy lifting, essentially, and we'd like to build this with you. We'd like to give you the ability to compare with one another and be able to quickly understand where you stand, so benchmarking, but we'd also like to help you spot top performers. So let's find out who has the best diversion success rate in the country. What are they doing? How many staff do they have? What's their protocol? It'd be great. It would be great if that person didn't have to field hundreds of calls every day as well. So it'd be nice if it was organized and you could quickly find what you needed to find at your fingertips, and it was all online. And that's what I want to work towards with you. That's what we want to work towards with you. We also understand homelessness is a housing problem. What I was talking about is operational KPIs, which is important. But at the end of the day, we need to pull in housing and socioeconomic data into our dashboards as well. Now, this doesn't undo any of the analysis you guys are doing. I've already seen some great presentations, and I know you're all doing individual research that's fantastic. But I get that it's a big lift to aggregate, wrangle, pull all those data sources together for a project that you might be able to churn out once a year. Why don't we make it real time? Why don't we get those data sources going now? Why don't we pull them into our dashboards and share them with you so you can spend more time doing what you want to do? And our coaches can coach off them effectively as well, because it all looks the same. Rather than them staring at 62 different dashboards, they're staring at one dashboard that keeps improving with all the key information. The possibilities really are endless. This is about innovation, so I want you to be inspired. And I'd love, actionable templates to be able to be generated. I'll wrap it up. Last thing I want to say. So I just want to summarize what we've talked about really quickly. So if you look at the lower level, in the middle, that's what we've got. We've got system level active inflow and outflow data for 62 communities across Canada. What we want is on the left there, HMIS operational KPIs. On the right as well, socioeconomic indicators. When you combine system level active inflow and outflow with HMIS operational KPIs, ultimately what you're doing is you're pursuing operational excellence. You're using data to support services and improve performance. When you combine the inflow data with socioeconomic indicators, you get powerful advocacy. You're influencing the policy, funding, and housing environments that shape homelessness. And when you get them both together, you also ultimately have system transformation and population level reductions. Thank you all so much for your time. Excited to work together.
Thank you, everyone, for that great presentation, both presentations. We have some time for some questions and answers. If you would like to ask a question, there is a microphone there. You may queue behind it, and then folks will answer questions as they can. And then we do have some translation as well, if you speak French.
Thanks for that. I'm from Laut, and we love to promote data transparency, especially the publication broadly amongst the public of impact statistics, namely how many people we move from a state of homelessness to stable housing and rooming per dollar spent. Anecdotally, and my question is to the audience as well as the three speakers, we've encountered some challenges. Namely, some nonprofits do not like this initiative because they feel that it's intimidating, and sometimes when they have poor performance metrics, they find they are stigmatizing. And sometimes they get a bit jealous and we get into negative situations. Is this significant? Is this something that we actually need to worry about? Is this something that is impeding this initiative?
So we look at data at the community level. So right away, yes, I'd like to look at the service provider level and help each service provider level up. Absolutely. But that won't be in the immediate future. But I think that with anything new, I've faced it throughout my career, especially in this sector, you have to get to a tipping point, and there's some nervousness around that. And ultimately, what we're doing as a movement right now is we're really pushing for transparency for all our data. Like, we see a lot behind the scenes. We've got some pretty great dashboards as well that aren't the community dashboards. We want to make it really transparent, and part of those data sharing agreements is basically pushing towards that. So getting to a place where everyone's numbers are out there, and we just accept that we're in a state of continuous improvement. I believe that that ultimately wins out, and I don't think it'll stop what we're doing. But we should consider it like setting the stage, right? We don't want anyone to feel like, hey, your metric's the worst, everyone's joking about you or anything like that, right? We want to create that culture of learning and environment. You can always improve the metric. Find out what it is and get excited about it. If it's your worst metric, it's your biggest opportunity to improve.
True.
Yeah.
Okay. Does it also apply at the community level? Because sometimes we notice some tensions when we do comparisons to the island of Montreal to other areas of Quebec as well, at an
Interesting.
aggregate level.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Yeah, we need to get away from that. Like, it's a big part of my presentation, but we stand to lose a lot, truly, as a movement. There's a lot going on right now. There's a lot of really again, non-housing first approaches. You heard Adam speak about what's happening in the U.S. So it's time for us to step up and be brave. And I know it's a pretty good sized room, but I hope that you share that message throughout with your colleagues, because we need to be transparent, and we need to share the information, again, regardless of what it tells us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi there. I just want to appreciate, Adam, your framework and the way you outline things really resonated with me, and I'll definitely be doing a deep dive on your website. When it comes to the data sharing agreement, I'm both a data person and also a privacy officer at a healthcare organization, so this intrigues me. Can you touch on some of the work you've done around data sovereignty and data ownership, and if we think about cross-sectoral data integration, handling confidential information and appreciating Indigenous data sovereignty becomes all the more important. So how do you plan on, through this standardization and this transparency of data, acknowledging that?
For sure. And do you want to take the Indigenous component and I'll take the de-identified? Okay.
Yes, you do.
Okay. All right. So as I mentioned, I have a master's of data science, and part of that program is basically being able to de-identify information so that it can't be re-identified. So there's a process to do that, and yeah, I mean, you can get to the point where you have the data so you know it's a unique person. For instance, let's say you're looking at diversion and you want to see, like, did that person come back a year from now, 2 years from now? You need a unique identifier, but you can do it in such a way that you don't re-identify the person. And actually, I think sitting behind you is Jeffrey Messier, Dr. Jeffrey Messier, who's done some incredible work on that, who I'd be excited to talk to soon. So yeah.
Great. And what about the storytelling aspect, that even though we're talking about de-identified data, the storytelling surrounding community and the way that community is then perceived, how do you allow, and something I really appreciate about Adam's presentation is a localized effort. How do you make sure that localized community members are impacting the way that the standardized data is producing a story?
Sure. So right now, I believe we're empowering communities. We're giving them information. And as we dive deeper and do so in a safe and respectful way, again, never collecting data in a way that could be, a person could be re-identified. I think we're basically empowering communities to raise those people up, connect those metrics with an individual person, Yeah, I don't want to get too dark, but I mentioned my cousin passed away while experiencing homelessness. If you had that data point, let's say you had it in a de-identified level, the number of people who passed away, and somebody like my aunt and uncle stepped forward and said, look, we'd like for Jordy's story to be shared as part of this, then I think that that's a great approach. But I think we can't just have stories because they can be misleading. And they're going to be more influential when it comes to policy changes. If they're attached to data. So.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Michael Sadler. I'm from British Columbia. I work for the First Nations Housing and Infrastructure Council. First presentation, yeah, that's a good foundational presentation, and I think it's the first question that that this gentleman asked. I think if we can start doing more of what you are doing with that as foundation, I think that might be able to address some of what his concerns were. Data is super important, we know that. Demographic information is important, people house is important. One of the things that we're trying to attempt to do in British Columbia to address this as well, though, is that it's one thing to put a roof over somebody's head, but it's also another thing to find programming that works for people. And in fact, some people are scared to go into housing because they don't want to be alone, because they could OD. Bad things can happen to them when they're in these, some of the buildings, so on and so forth. So I think, and I'd like to ask you, have you thought about also data or finding out once a bit of an intake and an assessment has been done on the person, which might take a bit of time Doesn't always happen in, you can't walk in and start interviewing somebody and get everything. It might take a year to get that from them and build trust with them to get that kind of information, but so that you can start categorizing them. We know, I was involved in a decampment process, a couple of them in Vancouver, and one of the things that we learned is that when you start looking at all of the needs that these folks have, we know some people need 24/7 care. There's no two ways about it. We know some people need alcohol and drug programming. We know some people are women and children affected by violence. We know some people who are coming out of incarceration. Each one needs different programming. Have you thought about that assessment aspect and getting people categorized so that you can start looking at, okay, we've got, in Toronto, we've got this number of people that need 24/7 care. We got this number of people that need this type of program and service, and then start using your data to measure successes.
Love that. Yeah. With aggregate data, we've done a lot, and we can continue to do more with the aggregate data that we do have. But I love that you said this, because we do need de-identified data to be able to go that deep and speak to those different things. And those are the things that we can do together if we're able to do this sensibly, carefully, ethically. And yeah, absolutely. I'd like to talk to you after about it.
We can definitely do that, because I think it's definitely needed.
Okay, thank you so much.
I just want to draw back to the question that was asked earlier, particularly around Indigenous data, Indigenous sovereignty. Anna was going to address that. So Anna.
So in relation to data sovereignty for Indigenous people, let's be really, really clear, open and frank. The current system sucks, and we know it does. We need to be very clear and very open about that. What we are doing at the Canadian Alliance is actually as part of the HRIF project, which you've heard mentioned, which is the Homelessness Reduction Innovation Fund, we're actually working with the National Indigenous Homelessness Council, and we're looking at what can we do with the systems that we have that make that not as colonial? What can we do that makes it more Indigenous friendly? It is going to be a really long road. There is a lot of learning and leaning into a lot of hard conversations where we have to say to people, actually, we kind of know we're doing it wrong and it sucks. We're not quite sure how to do this properly. And those conversations are going on just now, and they are going to take time. But we are looking at it, we're very aware of it, and we're being very open with people when we do the data sharing agreement. That's where this conversation came from, to say, this is where we currently are. We understand that we've put a data agreement in place with the person that's sending us the data. We actually don't know all the hoops behind how you got that data. And that's something that we're opening up just now and we're looking into. So it's going to be an ongoing piece of work, and it's going to take time. So yes, taking it very seriously. I wanted to circle back. The other last person had a question and talked about looking at people's needs. One of the things that we do when we talk to our communities, we actually ask them, how do you look at acuity? What are you doing to measure acuity? And how do you then know that when you're doing vacancy matching and prioritisation of your people, that you're putting them in the right place? That again is another area of ongoing work. Some people need a light touch, some people need intensive support, some people only need it for a few months, and some people will need it forever, and that is okay. Our system's not designed that way, and that's why we're talking about system improvement and trying to recognise no one size fits all.
Just like to add one bit here. So one thing I am really proud of us for, the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness, but also the sector at large, is we are wanting to have these difficult conversations with Indigenous community and partners. And that's ultimately because all the technology I showed up there, we want that to be accessible to everyone. So it's on us to work with them to find a way to make it work, because it would be wrong to just not include them. That would be horrible. Just say that, hey, this is too difficult to speak about. So we're going through those conversations because we want them to have the benefits. And we do have Indigenous community already participating in an early round of HRIF, which is very exciting. And we're learning throughout the process.
Just to promote 3:45 today, there's panel 1, Indigenous Data Sovereignty, Reclaiming Story, Power and Policy. That's in room 513 EF. So if you want to know more about that conversation, that is happening right after.
Thank you. Thank you to all the presenters. Sorry I missed most of yours, Adam, but I'd love to connect with you after to get more information. My name is Deborah Baker. I'm from the Squamish Nation. I work with Van City Community Foundation as the Indigenous Relations Director. And previous to that, I was Community Programs Director, and Reaching Home and BC Rent Bank were two programs under my belt. And so my question is in regards to the last presentation on funding for a program, which sounded really exciting. And I got to thinking, if we're, so we're partners with Luma Housing as through the community entity. So we have over 50 service providers that we work with for Reaching Home. And I'm wondering, and my apologies, I should probably know this answer, but would this program that you talked about at the end there, would it be more geared to the service providers rather than the community entities, or would it be a collaboration of both? And then my next question was actually towards Adam as well, or maybe all three of you, but I'm curious to learn what's happening in Indigenous communities in Canada and perhaps Native American communities in the United States. And I just really believe that there's an opportunity for synergy, not only with our brothers and sisters to the south, but Indigenous people around the world. We recently met with Indigenous people from Australia and the Maori from New Zealand. And I really believe that, and there may be a lot more others out there that would like to continue the dialogue around talking about this very important discussion. And thank you for your presentation too. I'm sorry I forgot your name.
Anna.
Pardon?
Anna McGregor.
Adam and...
Anna McGregor. I didn't do the Scottish accent. That was hard. It was hard for me to hold that back.
And the one next to you?
So Mitch, Anna, and Adam.
Oh my gosh. Okay, sorry about that. I thought your name was Adam, sorry. But, you know, this is, Squamish Nation, we just established a housing society. We have a low barrier building. The challenge is that I think when we hired our staff, they weren't fully equipped and trained. And unfortunately, the ones who are most vulnerable are suffering because of it. So I'm hoping that if there's anybody in the room that would have an opportunity to share some information with me as well on just staffing resources and having, not qualified, but maybe that is the word, but there's probably another word for that. But the staffing is really important too. Thank you.
Thank you. Anna, you want to take HRIF first?
Which part of
Eligibility in British Columbia.
So HRIF program is time limited and it's buckets of one-time funding, and we would be working with the person or the entity that had the quality data. So that looks different in each community. So for some communities it might be direct with that agency, or it might be a collaboration and partnership. So whoever has the quality data, that's the person that we're working with. So that will depend on each community. Any other parts to that question? No?
A little bit about BC and eligibility. I can speak to it if you want.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
In BC, BC communities are typically not eligible for HRIF funding at this time. They're working towards having by name data. And as you saw with the data infrastructure, we need to be able to quantify the results of the project. But we're working with BC to get there as quickly as possible. This is certainly a carrot. And we want to see BC get there. I'm from BC. So thank you so much.
We are talking to our community just now.
Hmm?
We are talking to our BC community just now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, I hear you.
We have about 10 minutes left for more questions. So if you have more questions, jump on up.
Yep.
Was that a specific question, like how I? Yeah. Oh, my presentation was more about the model. We don't we don't collect data on kind of that level of demographic, really intentionally, mostly because of data privacy. It's different in Canada. The United States is a very different situation that we're in now, so we really do limit the type of data that we collect. But happy to talk to you after the session if it'd be helpful.
Hi, I'm from Accueil Bonneau in Montreal. Thanks for your talk, very interesting. I kind of changed gears. I'm from the private sector, very recently joined not-for-profit. I very much appreciated your presentation, Adam. I'm hoping you could share again the QR code. But my question comes from whether you have financial data in the numbers that you're sharing. One of the challenges, because I'm only 4 months into this journey, is I'm missing comparatives to see how other provinces compare in terms of availability of funding, how much they have. I spoke to a few colleagues over lunch that are from Ontario, and I'm very surprised to find the numbers I'm hearing in a positive way. So I just, rather than sort of sending out a group email to everybody I meet, do you have data in your data set, please? And it's great, by the way, everything you're doing, and thank you.
Thanks. Amazing team. We're working hard. I have a finance background. I used to be an equity trader, so I definitely want to get financial data. I think that's a key component of this. At this time, that will be something that we have to build out, but the website in the future will be a vehicle, again, for transparency. So you'll see the analysis that we create. But at this time, no. But on the individual improvement projects, yes, we have tons of financial data on them.
If you need a volunteer, Accueil Bonneau, I'm in.
All right.
Okay, seriously.
Yeah.
So I think it's very important that we share all kinds of data, because it would be a shame if there's things other provinces are doing that the province where whoever is, the NPO is resided doesn't get information about, and we could potentially, how shall I say, negotiate our positions better. So I'm in if you need a volunteer.
Okay,
So
thank you so much. Love the idea, and that does make a lot of sense. Thank you.
So I'll just add a little bit onto that. So one of the things that we are trying to do when we are looking at the improvement projects and the dashboard that Mitch showed, if we get a project, now hypothetically, we're going to create a supportive housing unit, we are going to have 10 different units. How much did it cost? Well, you're going to be looking at actually the building costs, but then you're going to be looking at staffing costs. And then when you're looking at staffing costs, as one of the earlier questions, if it's high needs and high acuity, what's the ratio of clients to staff? Then what did that look like? Was that just 2 caseworkers, or is that 2 caseworkers and then is there somebody in the office? Wait a minute, is it a system navigator? Wait a minute, is it a custodian at the building? So what we are doing with our current improvement projects is we're teasing every single line out. You all do work off the side of your desk that does not get recognised and doesn't count. Nobody knows. So it looks like on paper it's 2 or 3 workers, but you actually know it's 4 or 5 people. You know there's a lot more work. So what we're trying to do is show what it really takes to do these projects, to make those real reductions, so that the next time someone takes on a project, they go in with their eyes open and they're set up for success.
Hi, I'm Shelley. I'm from the city of Kelowna. I've got 2 questions. I hope you can take maybe one of them. I thank you for talking about Indigenous data. I'm wondering more specifically, though, if you're talking about how to address concerns around ownership of that data. And then my second question is if BC is anticipated to have quality by name data in time for the next round of HRIF, or if we will be ineligible at the next round as well.
So we don't know exactly how quickly the data will move and change within BC, but we do think potentially at least something might happen. So somewhere there might be money that would be able to fund for HRIF somewhere in BC, depending on those pockets of how far people are with data. So that was your first part. Your other part, what's the piece that you're looking for? So one of the things that we're looking at, and we always say this, but this means nothing, and let's be clear, this is just words. The data is your data. Like, you always own your data. It's giving other people access to the data. So it's not that we take and we steal and we do stuff, and we understand that is exactly what's happened in the past. So let's be very clear, we know that that's wrong. So the conversations that we're having are literally just trying to unpack on all of that. So whose data is it? Who sees it? Where did it come from? How many hands were actually involved in it? So it's actually all of that, and it's going to take an awful lot of time, because it comes down to right at the very beginning, when you first have an interaction with a client, what did you ask them? What information did you gather? How did you gather it, and how did you record it? We're actually going right back to the basic bit there and starting there and then working up. A lot of the entities that we work with who send us anonymised data, we have an agreement with them, but we actually don't know all the agreements that they have in the background and how that worked back to that client. So we know that that's an issue. So we actually are looking and having conversations about all of those pieces.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll add that the data team all takes OCAP training, ownership, control, access, possession. So those are the Indigenous data sovereignty principles as soon as they're hired on. And when I joined the sector, I actually, in Kelowna, I took the same training right away. So I think that's a great place to start. So if any of you haven't done the OCAP course, I highly recommend it. These are not easy things to grapple with, but that's a great place to start for all your data staff. Thank you.
I actually just took it, and it's excellent training, and it's done very, very well. So we've got 3 minutes left. We have time for one more question. Well, going once, going twice. You're going to get 3 minutes of bonus time of your free time for the next 30 minutes, and then move on to your last session for today. So thank you everyone for coming. Have a good day.